The Salem Witch Trials, an Unsolved Mystery from History, by Jane Yolen and Heidi Elizabeth Yolen Stempel, illustrated by Roger Roth. The Salem Witch Trials, an Unsolved Mystery from History, by Jane Yolen and Heidi Elizabeth Yolen Stempel, illustrated by Roger Roth. When I grow up, I want to be a detective, just like my dad. He says I was born curious, and that the most important quality a detective needs is curiosity. Right now, I'm curious about old mysteries that have never been solved. The police call them open cases, but Dad and I call them unsolved mysteries from history. I am determined to figure out at least one of them. For each mystery, I collect as much information about the case as I can. As I learn the story, I organize the clues in my notebook. I always keep a list of words that are important to the case. The Salem Witch Trials happened because the Puritans who settled in Massachusetts were afraid of witchcraft and evil spirits. They believed that several young girls who lived in Salem Village could point out which townspeople were witches. Today we have ideas or theories about what really happened in Salem, but no one is absolutely sure. Still, my dad says that no mystery is impossible to solve, as long as you have enough clues. This is how the story goes. It was the long cold winter of 1692 in the small Puritan community of Salem Village, Massachusetts. The children of Reverend Samuel Parris, 9-year-old Betty, her younger sister and older brother, and their 13-year-old orphaned cousin Abigail were all expected to share in the household chores. The Parris children helped with the cooking and cleaning. They helped make the bread and the candles, churn the butter, and thresh the wheat and rye. Puritans believed idleness was an invitation for the devil to do mischief. Children were encouraged to read the Bible, but were not supposed to play games. If they left the house, it was almost always to attend church. No one paid much attention to Puritan children. Orphaned, without any living parents. Thresh, to whip dried stalks to remove seeds. Idleness, inactivity or not doing any work. Sect, a group with religious beliefs different from the majority. Moral code, rules for proper conduct. The Puritans who helped settle Massachusetts were members of a strict religious sect. They had faith that their simple ways were the purest form of Christianity. Children and adults were bound by a moral code. All were expected to work hard, and they believed that everything in their lives was pre-planned by God. Also living in the Parris household were 2 slaves, John Indian and his wife Tituba. Betty and Abigail were especially fond of the stories Tituba told life about in Barbados. So different from life in Salem Village, and Tituba told them about Barbadian magic. The girls already knew a fortune-telling game played by many English colonists. To learn the identity of their future sweethearts, they cracked eggs in well water and read the floating white forms. But now when Betty and Abigail talked with other Salem Village girls, they secretly whispered about Tituba's magic. Tituba was likely a North or South American Indian and not of African blood. She was probably kidnapped by European slave traders and raised as a house slave on Barbados plantation. There, surrounded by slaves from many cultures as well as the European masters, she would have learned many fantastic games and stories. Few records about Tituba exists, though, so what is known of her background is mostly guesswork. The people of Salem Village had many things to worry about. A new charter so they could continue to own land, as well as frequent outbreaks of smallpox. They were upset with Reverend Parris, who was demanding higher wages. Most frightening to the villagers was the native population, who had first welcomed them as early settlers, but soon the settlers began lying to the people they called Indians, kidnapping them for slaves, accidentally infecting them with diseases, even slaughtering them intentionally. By 1692, reprisal attacks by the native people along with the French allies were not uncommon in Massachusetts. All through the colonies, battles were beginning to break out. The Salem villagers were afraid. Massachusetts was one of the 13 New World colonies. Each was governed by a charter, or legal paper, granted by the King of England. The charter allowed the people living there to own all of their land, which to the Puritans was the most important form of wealth. In 1688, the original Massachusetts charter had been revoked by the king, and in 1692 a new one had not yet arrived. Smallpox, a highly contagious and often fatal disease. Intentionally, on purpose, reprisal, a repayment of an injury, insult, or other attack. Allies, people, countries, or populations who cooperate with one another. Revoked, withdrawn, cancelled, or taken back. One bitterly cold day in February, Betty and Abigail both fell ill. Collapsing onto their small rope beds, they convulsed, they contorted, their arms and legs jerked about. They shouted bizarre, unintelligible words. They crouched under chairs and cowered as if frightened. In other houses in Salem, several of their friends began to act the same way. The other sick girls in Salem Village included Ann Putnam, Jr., age 12, Mercy Lewis, age 19, Mary Walcott, age 16, Elizabeth Hubbard, age 17, and Mary Warren, age 20. Like Abigail, Elizabeth, and Mercy were orphans. Mercy may have witnessed her parents being killed in an Indian attack 3 years earlier in Maine. Mary Walcott had lost her mother when she was 8. Anne and Betty were daughters of landowners, but Mary Warren, Elizabeth, and Mercy were maidservants. Convulsed, shook violently, contorted, twisted into unusual shapes, unintelligible, impossible to understand. The local physician, Dr. Griggs, was called to examine Betty and Abigail. He found no illness in his medical books that matched the girls' symptoms. As far as he could tell, they had not been poisoned. They did not need bleeding, nor did their limbs need setting. He knew no other way to heal them. Dr. Griggs pronounced Betty and Abigail bewitched. The evil hand is upon them, he said. His prescription, prayer and fasting. In the 17th century, many illnesses were blamed on evil, and doctors often recommended religious cures. A country doctor, a title given to any healer, whether or not he had a medical degree, would sometimes use bleeding, draining patients of supposed excess blood, as a treatment. Most of today's common medicines had not yet been discovered or invented, and people regularly died of ordinary ailments such as strep throat, measles, and even dental problems. Pronounced, formally declared, bewitched, under an evil spell, prescription, a doctor's instructions. Fasting, going without food for a period of time. Ailments means sickness. Thinking Tituba might be able to help, Mary Walcott's aunt, Mary Stipley, asked Tituba to bake a witch cake, made of rye and the girl's urine, to feed the prairess's dog, which Mary Stipley believed was an evil messenger. When Reverend Parris heard about this, he made Mary Stipley stand up in church and admit what she had done. He told his parishioners never to use white magic, even to break a bad magic spell. Standing in front of his church, he warned of a going to the devil for help against the devil. Witch cake, a special rye and cake that some Puritans believed could reveal evil spirits. Parishioners, members of a church community. White magic, magic used only for good. Most religious people of the 17th century believed in evil spirits, magic, and witches. They thought witches made a pact with the devil and were given certain powers such as the ability to curse a neighbor with a poor planting season or even smallpox. Witches could be male or female, young or old. It was also believed that each witch had an animal familiar, a dog, cat, toad, or owl, to help work the evil magic. Everyone prayed, everyone fasted. Important religious men from other communities came to say prayers over the girls, but nothing worked. The girls continued to weep, faint, contort, and speak gibberish. In a rare moment of calm, the girls were asked who was bewitching them. They named 3 women. One was Sarah Good, one was Sarah Osborne, and the third woman was Tituba. Gibberish, nonsense words. Disputed, questioned, or argued over. Sarah Good was a poor, pregnant, pipe-smoking, bad-tempered woman with a young daughter. When Sarah Good was accused, her own husband stated in court that he thought she might be a witch. Sarah Osborne was a sick, older woman who gossiped about because she did not attend church. She had married a servant, and she had disputed land ownership on her first husband's will. Her first husband had owned land, which had left in trust of Sarah Osborne for his sons. She had contested the will to try to keep the land as her own. The girls said they saw specters, floating spirits no one else could see, doing bad things. The specters pinched and pricked the girls, who fell to the floor in shrieking fits. On the first day of March, Tituba confessed to being a witch. At first her story was simply an admission, but soon she spoke of sister witches, a mysterious man dressed in black, and even flying upon a stick. Everyone believed she was speaking the truth, as they believed the girls too. After being beaten and then questioned over and over again, Tituba finally confessed. This saved her life because it made her important to the court. Her accusers now believed she had special knowledge that could help them find other witches. Had she not confessed, it would have been assumed that she was lying, and she would surely have been executed. Since Betty Paris was so young, she was sent away to stay with another family in a nearby Salem town. The girls who remained became famous in the village. Ann Putnam Jr. and Mary Walcott were even asked to visit sick people in other towns to see if their illnesses had some relationship to the devil. Some of the girls were invited to touch suspected witches to see if they could feel evil spirits. If the girls said they felt the devil, those people were accused of witchcraft. Everyone was listening to the girls. Suspected. Thought to be guilty, but without proof. Accused. Blamed for a crime or wrongdoing. After being hardly noticed their whole lives, the girls had become the center of attention. They were brought around to other towns to help adults there hunt for witches. It must have made them feel important, even powerful, to be recognized everywhere. Their names were on everyone's lips. Even people as far away as Boston had heard of them. Soon the courthouse was filled with the accused. The jailhouse was with the convicted. No one was safe, not even those who were well thought of. Martha Corey and her husband Giles, members of the church and landowners, respected townswoman Rebecca Nurse, and John and Elizabeth Proctor, who lived outside the village, were all named as witches. To be with her mother, Sarah Good, 5-year-old Dorcas Good confessed to being a witch and was led away in chains. Reverend George Burroughs, who had preached in Salem Village years earlier, was accused of committing murder while under the devil's influence. More than 141 people were arrested. Convicted. Proved guilty of a crime or wrongdoing in a court of law. Influence. The power to affect someone's beliefs or actions. Finally, as 1692 was coming to an end, the new Puritan governor of Massachusetts, Sir William Phips, came to see for himself why the witchcraft hysteria had overwhelmed the village. Many important people, even Phips's own wife, were being accused of witchcraft as other townsfolk let Salem's lead. Phips declared that no person should be allowed to stand up in court and testify to seeing invisible spirits. Such things could not be proven. Without spectral evidence, no one else could be convicted of witchcraft. Hysteria. Wild and uncontrollable emotion. Testify. To make a statement based on personal knowledge or belief. Only those who had not confessed to being witches were ever tried. When spectral evidence was introduced at a trial, the jury had to decide whether or not to believe the accusers, since no one could actually see the evidence. Spectral. Ghostly, having to do with ghostly or invisible things. By the time the witch trials came to an end, 19 people had been hanged as witches. 1 man was pressed to death under a pile of rocks. 4 others died in jail awaiting trial. Governor Phips pardoned the people still in jail, but they had to remain until their families paid all of their jail costs. Tituba was sold by Reverend Paris to cover her jail fees. In 1712, payments were made to some families with suffering families. In 1752, Salem Village changed its name to Danvers, so that not to be associated with the trials. In 1957, Massachusetts formally apologized for the events of 1692. But it wasn't until 1992, 300 years later, that Massachusetts House of Representatives passed a resolution formally acknowledging that the accused had been innocent of witchcraft. Pardoned, canceled punishment for a crime. Jail costs, fees from a person's stay in jail, charged as if they were a hotel, including costs for food, bedding, and a share of the jailer's pay. Resolution, formal statement of opinion or intent agreed upon by a group. Acknowledging, recognizing that something is true or valid. At the time of the witch trials, Salem Village had a population of 550 people with its 20 square miles. The village was in an area where streams ran through the swampy land. There today are the towns of Danvers, Middleton, and Peabody. Together they have a combined population of around 70,000. Salem town has become the city of Salem, and the witchcraft trials are its primary tourist attraction. In both Salem and Danvers, there are historical museums, including Rebecca Nurse's house, a memorial to the victims, witchcraft-themed gift shops, and many popular ghost tours.